This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from BuilderMasterclass.com and ConstructionLeadingEdge.com. My name is Todd DeWalt. It's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, eliminate chaos and maximize profits. We've got a great interview for you today with Brandon Patterson from Iowa Skilled Trades. He's a workforce development expert who's going to help you if you're trying to attract and retain young people for your business or your team. We're going to talk about the skilled labor shortage in the country today. Here's what you're going to get out of this podcast interview. We talk about topics including what do most people get wrong about the skilled labor situation. We'll talk about what the Crew Collaborative is. This is a nationwide effort that Brandon is part of. You'll learn how the Build My Future event happening in Iowa is different from other career fairs, and you may get some ideas about how you can use some of these concepts. We talk about what isn't working when it comes to attracting young people. We talk about some out-of-the-box approaches that people are using. And Brandon talks about how we need to stop letting other people tell our stories about the industry and about our businesses. And he gives some great advice on how you can get started telling your own story. And then we talk about some keys to retaining employees once they come on board. What are they looking for? Why is the retention rate so low? And what can you do about it? This is a great interview. This is a big problem. So whether you are trying to find some skilled employees right now, or you think you might need to hire somebody in the next few years, then this is going to be really helpful for you. I've got a couple of words from my sponsors, a couple of resources I want to share with you before we get started with that interview. All right, let's talk about a form of chaos I know you've experienced before, a bad customer review. Did you know it only takes one negative review to stop a potential job in its tracks? Your reputation takes years to build. Don't let one review change that. From Yelp to Google to Facebook, GoSite helps you manage and generate reviews all in one easy-to-use place. Research shows your customers need to see at least 30 positive reviews in order to trust your brand, and top-ranking businesses on Google have an average of 40 reviews. So, a job well done and a happy customer aren't just revenue, they're marketing opportunities. GoSite makes it easy to build your credibility and authority as a construction leader by automatically asking your already happy customers for a new review with just one click. Take control of your customer reviews and turn your 5-star success into more revenue with GoSite's easy-to-use mobile app. Get started for free at gosite.com/podcast. That's GOSITE.com/podcast. How many hours have you spent creating and chasing endless invoices? Is your cash flow hurting because of delayed or, even worse, non-payment situations? Doing business the old-fashioned way is wasting your time and money. Take control and get paid on time for your hard work with Approval. Approval is an easy-to-use payment management tool for milestone-based projects. It creates an interactive payment flow designed specifically to help contractors like you automate contract terms and better control your accounts receivable. So how does Approval do that? As a contractor, you start by setting up the project scope and timeline, divided by clear project milestones. Then, for each milestone, you decide if it should be paid up front or at completion. You can even advance and commit funds at the beginning of a milestone, which will get released as soon as work is completed. Your client can then view and accept the project, approve each milestone at a time, and make payments all in one place. Now you have accountability to refer back to so that you can reduce errors, avoid project delays, and mitigate risk by connecting each transaction to project milestones. Approval really is a win-win situation. The pay-per-milestone model allows contractors to get paid faster, all while providing homeowners with a better experience and more trust so you can win more jobs. Get started today. Visit withapproval.com to see more and click Request Demo to get in touch. That's withapproval.com. And now let's jump into my conversation with Brandon Patterson from Iowa Skilled Trades. Enjoy. Brandon, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we got connected a couple of years ago. I think we actually met in person once, 27 years ago in an IBS event. It seems like pre-COVID, but you're really involved and completely engrossed in the skilled labor issue that the construction industry is facing. So we'll get into the work you do and talk about how people can get involved and how they might be able to start their own thing if they have the desire to do so. But when it comes to the skilled labor situation, the skilled labor deficiency, the skilled labor crisis, whatever people call it in the construction industry, what are a lot of people getting wrong?
There's probably a few different sides of that too, because you can go from like the parent side, school side of things, maybe where they're getting it wrong. So like one of the big things that I'm on now, I don't know how it got in my brain, but it just did recently, where it's just like everybody probably just assumes on that side because of misinformation or just no awareness whatsoever. Maybe they don't even have friends in the trades, or what if they do, they don't talk about it. They just assume that a plumber makes minimum wage, or they just assume that a welder is only a welder for a certain thing, and that welder probably only makes minimum wage. They don't know any of the actual facts behind that job, or if the facts that they know could be outdated, and they don't have any actual knowledge about how it is now. I can tell you, coming from a plumbing family, my plumbing family wasn't making minimum wage. They were making well beyond that and supported 4 kids on that. So it's not something that everybody has the right facts and information on. And then on the other side of things, when it comes to kind of like maybe recruiting and hiring the next generation, I think that we're using just outdated models or outdated ideas. For the longest time, people probably thought that it was okay to just put help wanted sign up, or, put it in a paper, put it on the radio, whatever. Well, that's not where your audience is. You have to know who your audience is. And that's kind of like bringing in maybe people who understand social media or digital media and helping kind of like narrow those demographics down, and then figuring out where your audience actually is. So if you're looking for a 18 to 25-year-old, they're on TikTok and Instagram, YouTube, they're probably not on a regular radio. They're probably not on Facebook very much, So you have to know, kind of like, as somebody like HR or whoever, like you're trying to target, like where to find those people at. I think we have a kind of bad idea, and we're, somebody could be like, oh, I put a message on LinkedIn, or I'm doing it, or sorry, not LinkedIn, Facebook. Well, Facebook's average age is 65. So are you going to try and find somebody who's retired? Is that what you're looking for? You're putting it in the wrong place. So good for you that you're on Facebook, but you're probably putting it in the right place when you're trying to find your next hire. So,
yeah, we tend to project what we're interested in onto everybody else, and then, yeah, if you're advertising on Monster, or you're doing stuff that worked back in 2004, then yeah, you're probably going to be disappointed. What are some misconceptions that construction business owners and leaders and hiring managers have about the up and coming generation?
I mean, one of the biggest ones is obviously no work ethic. You come down here to Iowa, I'm going to show you kids who have a work ethic. It's there, they have it. What they don't have is experience for some of them. Some of these kids, you're right, they don't have experience maybe in the field because they don't have experience. They never had the opportunity. Some of those kids don't have shop class. Once you get them in there and show them how to do something, they're going to work. They're going to enjoy it. So I think that the work ethic is one of them. I think the, willingness to learn, willingness to show up on time and do those types of things, which all could still fall under work ethic, I guess. But I think they're wrong about that. I think people want to work. I think people want to go out there and learn something. What they might not understand is that a lot of this younger generation, they want to see what they're doing. Like, what is my future? Me going to work every day doing this, where does that get me in 5 years or 10 years? They want to see that. They want to see what they're building. They want to see what this job is all about. They want to know, like, social good is one of the things that a lot of younger people care about. how is this job that I'm doing giving back to the community? What is it doing for the environment? That type of stuff, like there's a lot of people that care about that type of stuff. So I think that there's just a lot of different misconceptions out there, but the biggest one that probably that we hear the most on our end of the thing is, work ethic and, willingness to adapt and change. And, like nobody wants to be outside in the cold in Iowa in the winter, not even adults, but that's part of the job. But once they learn that part of the job and once they see that paycheck, they're usually like, okay, I can do this. Or if not, what part of that trade can they do that's inside instead of outside or wherever? They figure it out pretty fast. So
you mentioned social good. Talk about that a little bit more. What do you mean when you say that the younger generation is concerned about social good?
I think social good could mean a few different things, but to me, it's like the community is a piece of it, but then also, and I also mentioned environment. So like, what is your job doing? Like, is it a job or a trade or something that, could potentially go against maybe your moral code, if that's what you want to think of it as like, is it going something that you believe in as that person, as that employee? Social good, like, is it doing something good for the community? Is it doing like a Habitat for Humanity? Is it somebody who does these things and works with these other companies to make the world a better place, basically, instead of leaving it better than you found it type of thing, instead of, basically I'm just out to, get a paycheck and I don't care what happens if we're ruining the environment or whatever. They want to know that what they're doing is leaving it better than they found it.
Yeah, I think we all have a deep need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to do good. We want to understand why we're doing it. And what I've found is, like, some people listening might be thinking, I replace concrete driveways, or I build spec homes, or we install light fixtures, or whatever it is. And well, your primary work doesn't have to be the thing that does social good. It might be a little tough to do that, but you can do some events, you can do some fundraisers, you can do a couple of Saturdays a year where you are doing social good. And what I found is that gets people pretty jacked up, knowing that, maybe the work that they do isn't directly connected to the social good, but the company they work for is, and
right.
They're part of something that's doing something valuable, good for the environment. I ran a sewer rehab company for a few years, and nobody could see any of our work. You couldn't drive by and all you saw was a manhole. That was it. And it's hard to get your kids excited about or proud of dad for, looking at manhole covers. But when you think about it, what I told my guys and gals was, we're keeping the streams clean. We're keeping the sewage in the collection system and out of the streams. That's what you're doing. So if you're ever wondering, does your work matter? Absolutely. Those kids who are at a little league game and they go down and play by the creek, that's just upstream from the sewer treatment plant, you're keeping them safe. So
right.
I think it's very important to draw a connection between what somebody's job is and the effect on everybody else around them. Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to this work ethic thing. Where does this come from? Where does this millennials and young people don't have a work ethic? Where does it come from?
I think a lot of that is probably just the negative perception and stigma that's out there, that's been allowed to be out there for as long as it is. Especially on, the generations where, you call them the participation trophy generation or whatever, basically everybody wins a war. Nobody had to work for this type of thing. So I think it just goes along with some of that. And it just kind of stuck for whatever reason. And then you have, and some of it's probably attached to, so these kids, I call them kids, could be, they just graduate college and then they come home and they live in their parents' basement and, they can't find jobs. So then they're, just kind of, can't figure out what they're doing, even though they got a college degree and, they got all this debt. Well, part of the reason they went probably back home was because they couldn't find a job. for the degree that they had. And then also because they have 40, 50, 60,000 plus dollars of debt. So they can't go just pay for an apartment because they don't have a job and they have all this debt. So it's just kind of one of those things that sticks with them because they assume that since they're living in their parents' basement that, this person's just failure to launch or whatever. They're not going to go out there and do anything when in reality they want to work, but what they just went to school for didn't prepare them for what they actually need to have a degree or whatever in, because none of those jobs are actually available to them.
Yeah. So in some cases, it's like Mike Rowe, who we talked about briefly before we hit record. Mike Rowe says it's not the kid's fault. They've been deluded into thinking what you need, you have to have a college degree, and they go get a college degree, and then there's no job for that degree, and there's this whole economy around education that just sucks kids in, and they end up with debt and all sorts of problems. So let's talk about your work. What exactly, looks like you're into several things, but just tell us about the work you do.
Yep, sure. So I am employed by the Home Builders Association of Des Moines and of Iowa partially. So my title is workforce development. Before I was ever an employee, I was on the board for 8 years. So I was heavily involved as a volunteer. And one of the things that I cared about the most was our workforce, because for years I sat in those board meetings where people are like, we can't find workers. We can't find workers. We can't find people to build our houses. We can't find people to deliver our goods. We can't find people to do whatever. And there's just a point where it's like, all right, I can't deal with this anymore. So I want to get more involved in trying to do that. Well, at the same time, we came together and we decided to privately fund, between public and private partnerships, a skilled trades academy with one of our large metro schools here. And we called that the Skilled Trades Academy. So at the time, we thought that we needed, $900,000 to sustain the school from our industry, to cover 3 teachers, the curriculum, the tools, all that stuff, to be able to do like carpentry, welding, electric, plumbing, have all these different programs down there. Well, we raised like $1.6 million in a short amount of time to be able to fund this. And at this point, we're well over $2 million. And we've gone on, I think we're into our 3rd full year now, which is a little bit different because of COVID. But so anyway, at the same time we were doing that. So it's just heavily involved in trying to grow this pipeline, this next generation of tradespeople. And in 2018, I think it was, I was offered a job to come on full time and do this. So, and in that time, we started Iowa Skilled Trades, which is a separate nonprofit outside of the Home Builders Association, which is kind of like our Skilled Trades initiative. And we're doing a lot of things under kind of like that program name across the state.
Talk a little bit about this event that's coming up in a couple of weeks, the Build My Future event.
Yeah, so Build My Future is what the education community would call a career immersion event. And basically it is just like a hands-on experience. Instead of being a typical career fair where colleges are handing out flyers, or military's handing out flyers, or the trades are handing out flyers or applications, those same people are doing hands-on activities. So one of our community colleges bring in their automotive program, they're bringing their construction program, they're bringing their nursing program, and then the military has obstacle courses and robotics and things that you can do that way. And then our tradespeople are doing things like welding. They're constructing a canine dog park that's actually going to be used in Des Moines for the police department. Things like that actually like the students get their hands on, because some of these students unfortunately haven't touched some of these tools in their life, right? Like I grew up with shop and woods and metals and all that stuff in our schools. Well, they might not have that. So this is a way where their counselors and teachers can get them out and they can see all these different career pathways that are available in Iowa, but also get their hands on it. And the good news is most of the people who are working those booths or exhibits are usually like the HR director, the business owner, the apprenticeship coordinator. It's exactly the person that they should be talking to. It's not somebody who's in there that's just trying to recruit kids. It's the person who runs those businesses and those associations, organizations, or whatever that can help them get to that next step.
Interesting. Have you done these events before?
So this is technically our third year planning it and second year doing it, because last year we planned the full thing and had to cancel it due to COVID. Probably about a year ago, we were busy canceling the event and refunding people. So we're happy and excited to put this on. We need the event as much as the students need the event. It seems like everybody's ready to get out and like do something, like not just go to school. Go to school is great, but like actually get their hands on something, do activities, and see these things. Because we lost, in my opinion, a whole recruiting class for our pipeline, not just trades, but everybody last year. There was no career fairs. There was no Build My Future. There was none of that. So how do we, get that thing up and running again? Because we all need it. Our workforce here is in a real bad place, in my opinion. So,
yeah, let's talk about how bad is it? A few years ago, I did some research. I even did some workshops on the skilled labor situation, but it's been a while since I've looked at it. And certainly haven't looked at it since COVID. But what does the landscape look like for skilled trades right now? From what do people need to know about what this situation really looks like?
Well, and a positive way to look at it is if you're a young kid or somebody who graduated college or whatever, there are so many opportunities in the skilled trades. So if you want to look at it as a positive way, there are so many opportunities to be a business owner, to go get a job, to, just better your career or take that next step. There's so many opportunities out there all over the scope. I mean, from heavy equipment to, lineman, electrician to carpentry, whatever. I mean, they say that the average age of a lineman around here is almost 60 years old. Well, what are you going to do when all these people retire? If that's the majority of their workforce, right? What are you going to do when all of them retire and we don't have the next generation to move up? So that's a positive way of looking at it, because that there's lots of opportunities. The downside of this is that we're kind of in this spot here where that generation is retiring and we haven't fully recruited or educated the next generation of our workforce now. And you can see a lot of states that are doing workforce development programs and all these different pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship programs to try and start, the process. But, it seems like we're so far behind, because the biggest thing for us is it was going to happen regardless. But then in 2008, the housing market crashed and a lot of people didn't come back to the construction industry when it stepped back up in like 2012. So we lost, I think, something like almost 1 million workers. Well, half of those workers didn't come back to the construction workforce. And then you have things like natural disasters, which just seem to be happening, more and more, or at least because we do have these urban areas that are more high density, they create more damage than, like when people weren't living that close together. So you have more of a problem there that then, you lose some of your workforce that might leave your state to go to help those areas. So like last year we had a land hurricane called derecho here in Iowa. Well, we were already hurting for workforce, and it was the busiest year that our industry had in over a decade. And then we had the derecho. So we're already short on help. Then we had that. People's roofs are ripped off or their houses completely destroyed or windows blown out. And then you had supply chain issues due to COVID last year. So it kind of just had all these things happening. So it's definitely something here where we're in so much need. At one point we were across the state, just Iowa, we needed 3,000 drivers. This is drivers that could be, like a semi driver. It could be a driver for the Department of Transportation, whatever. We were short around 3,000 drivers. Well, every one of those drivers, let's just say you needed, 300 mechanics to keep those 3,000 trucks going. Well, guess what? We don't have mechanics either. So just one of those things where we need to bring in not only drivers, we need the mechanics for those trucks. We need people who have those skills. So it's kind of like it's not just the building industry. It's all industries. I believe healthcare is in a bad spot, and that was before COVID. It wasn't a bad spot. So it's just kind of one of those things where we need to step our game up a little bit.
Yeah, it's coming, and we can kick the can down the road to a point, but at some point you can't kick the can down the road any further. Yeah, you mentioned healthcare. A few years ago, there was a shortage of doctors. Talk about skilled labor shortage. There was, I don't know, five-figure shortage of doctors a few years ago. And then they projected that maybe by now there would be a 6-figure shortage of doctors. And if you think it takes a while to train an electrician, think about a cardiologist or a neurosurgeon. It takes like 14 years to create one of those. So the medical industry realized, well, we definitely need to get more people into our trade, which is what it is, but we also have to shift some things around in the way we do things. And they started offloading some of the things that physicians had to do, and then empowered other people like physician's assistants and nurses and folks like that to be able to do things. But yeah, it is interesting how I forgot about the weather event you guys had, and then think about what just happened in February in Dallas with that massive, not just Dallas, but the entire state of Texas and probably that whole area. The impact on plumbing and all of the fire and water restoration that has to be done after that. It just creates a giant spike in demand, which sucks people out of other industries, and it just has a real ripple effect. Yeah. What is Crew Collaborative? I've seen you post about that, but tell us about that.
Yeah, Crew is a kind of like, I think of it more of as like a national, workforce development kind of initiative to really change the way that we recruit and retain people in the construction industry. There's a lot of, obviously we talked about stigma and stuff a little bit about the next generation that's coming up, but then also, current cultures and things that exist. How do we change some of that and create a better work environment for everybody type of thing? So, Christina is our fearless leader, our executive director. We just had our first board retreat and formally formed the board last weekend. So I'd read you a mission statement, but it's not fully complete yet. So, but that's what I like to think of it as. So we have some people from all over that, you could be a heavy equipment operator. There could be somebody like me who's just, workforce development, commercial construction. We have people on the concrete side. We have people who are doing like more of like the fuel side of things, like oil and things like that. So we have people kind of like from all over, and there's 20 of us, kind of just really forming something where we want to do similar to maybe like what I'm doing in Iowa Skilled Trades, but on a national level, and make a huge impact and really start to kind of like put our money where our mouth is and change things a little bit.
Got it. And I'll ask you to share I'll share some links in the show notes about all of these different places people can go if they want to follow up. Here's my question for you. You've got a bunch of construction business owners who need to find quality people. If they want to hire young people, well, let's just say young people. They want to bring young people into their business because they recognize what's going on. If you could lay out a good way to get started, like what should they stop doing? We talked about a couple of those things. Where should they be focusing their efforts? Like where's the 20% of the places they can focus their effort on getting their message out and get 80% of the results, for example. And then my next question is going to be, how do we keep these people once we get them into our organization? But what would you tell them? How, based on your experience, what should they stop doing that's not working? And then where can they focus their efforts to get the process started?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you have to stop letting people tell your story and creating the narrative for our industry about what our industry is. Because for a generation, we've allowed people to do that, and we've completely turned people off of our industry and allowed somebody else to spread the narrative that we're this blue collar workforce. We're not educated. We're not this, we're not that. Well, that's far from the truth. You would know that most of the people in our industry have to do continuing education, and not only are they doing continuing education all the time, they have to learn on the job all the time, because we're continually adding technology and integrating all that stuff into our side of our industries and stuff like that. It's not for people who are uneducated. This is something that construction math is something that always is very important. If you're an electrician, even more important. If you're doing some kind of crazy takeoffs and stuff like that, where you're doing load bearing and, there's BIM mapping, there's all these different things that our industry has in it. So we have to stop letting people tell our story and controlling our narrative. They need to pick up the reins, and they need to start saying, they need to be the ones that actually go to the schools. They need to be the one, as the owners of the businesses or the HR teams from the businesses, and they need to go in there and they need to tell their stories to this next generation. And they need to start early. If you need to start a construction camp for 3rd through 5th graders or middle schoolers from your business, like, hey, I own this commercial business, I'm doing a construction camp for kids that's a week long, that would be amazing, because then you start building those kids and you have them from 3rd grade on or 5th grade on. You have to catch them early. And we've let it go too long, where we think we're going to catch them by the time that they're seniors. Well, by the time they're seniors, they've been told a lot of things that we can't fix. And a lot of them probably already committed to what's next. So you have to catch them before that. So you have to stop relying on people to do that for you. You have to stop, once again, and we talked about earlier, stop marketing in the wrong place. If you're spending all your time and money on things that you were doing 15, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago now, Facebook was the place to be 5 years ago, because it actually had an organic reach and it made sense. And the average age wasn't 65, it was 45 then probably, right? So you have to start marketing in the right places. You have to start creating content for those people so they see it at a young age. So like TikToks and things like that, make really neat videos and things that draw them in. It doesn't even have to talk about construction, salaries and boring stuff like that. It can just shed a positive light on what we do in this industry, instead of letting somebody else create a negative thing about us. So that's what I would change.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you think about the stigma associated with, well, if you think about a TV show that has a plumber on it, right? What does that plumber typically look like?
Right.
Overweight, pants hanging off, butt crack showing, bumbling idiots, lazy construction workers. The narrative because we haven't created the right narrative, the media and other sources have filled that vacuum in with negative stuff. And It seems kind of harmless until you realize these kids have grown up watching TV shows where construction workers are lazy, or they're catcalling women, or their pants are falling off. And we have to get the right narrative out there. So let's break it down. If somebody said, Brandon, what kind of content should I create? Where should I put it? So I need to find, I need people in the next 12 months. And I learned something a few years ago. My son is a college basketball player. And I learned college coaches don't try to recruit people in the 3 months before they start college. Some do, but the smart ones are recruiting at the D1 level. They're recruiting when they're the top talent in 7th grade, 8th grade, freshmen in high school. My son had college coaches building relationships with him before his junior year. And that's the school he ended up going with. So I think we have to have the same mindset. If you want to get top quality talent, you can't just start recruiting when you have a need. You have to start building the recruiting base years in advance. So let's say you're talking to somebody and they know that they want to start recruiting people who are 18 to 20 years old right now. Where should they focus their efforts? Is it TikTok, Snapchat? Where would you recommend that they focus their efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably put my efforts on your TikToks, your Instagrams, Snapchat for sure. I don't think there's anything wrong with still marketing in your Facebooks and your Twitters and things like that, because it's still content, still helps you be seen. YouTube is a huge one. What can you put out on YouTube? What can you put out on, some of these maybe gaming systems that have streaming services that offer like OTT, which is like, your digital commercials and stuff like that. Just target that and then put out content that shows like day in the life of, make it sexy, make it cool. Obviously you can show the gritty and the truth too, but I think they need to know that the options available to them. I think they need to see that there's a career pathway that doesn't just have them. They want to see that moving up is available to them. They don't want to just see that, hey, if I enter and join as a plumbing apprentice, that I'm just going to be this plumber in a hole or under a sink the rest of my life. They need to see what's the steps to get to that next level after you're under a sink being an apprentice. What's next? Can you be your own business owner? Can you have your own truck? Can you be more independent? They want to be able to, once again, do some of that community stuff and things too, like almost kind of like you're not a freelancer, but you have more freedom in that job. They want to see that freedom. They want to see, what's available to them. So I think you got to make good content. You got to be consistent with it. You can't put it out once and expect people to see it. You have to be consistently daily putting content out there, good content, not bad stuff. So if you have to hire a videographer or professional photographer to do some of that stuff, or, take photos and videos of some of your job sites for 2 or 3 days, interview some of your employees who are apprentices and young, and, put some pieces together that revolve around that to start. And then from there, you can kind of build it type of thing. And I will say too, you were talking a little bit about the going after recruiting when they're in 7th, 8th grade, when they're D1 sports. Same thing goes for culture. When you look at those coaches that are building those teams from 7th and 8th graders all the way up, grooming them to get them into their colleges, they're also, when you're a new coach, you have to build a culture too. So those cultures take years to build too. It's not going to be like an overnight success. It takes a lot of time to build your recruiting class, and it takes a lot of time to build your culture. So how long do you actually need to put that together? What's it look like? So you got to have a plan in place to go after those and keep it. And you were talking about, how do we retain some of those people? I think it really is culture. I think it is making sure that they know that the pathway doesn't just end at after you finish your apprenticeship, you're just a journeyman plumber or you're just a master plumber, that there's other things that you can do after that. And then also allowing them to the freedom maybe to train and educate themselves and do more things to just better their career. Because if you're afraid to let your employees train and get educated and do these things because you're afraid they might take your job, or maybe you're afraid they might leave, guess what? If you keep holding them down, they're going to leave anyway. So why not train them and make them better? They're probably going to want to stay. And then maybe someday they'll be the one that buys your business. There's definitely ways where we can make sure that they know that the pathways are unlimited. And I mentioned it too a little bit earlier, just having a little bit of freedom, right? So like, if that means like, hey, they can join a chamber of commerce, or hey, they can join like this breakfast club or whatever, some sort of way where they feel like almost kind of like a little bit of like an entrepreneur, where they have that, gives them a little bit of a fire to go out, talk to people in the community. They're still doing their job, but they're also promoting your business.
I like that. So create stories, video content. And one of the things I see a lot of people doing is they'll interview the executives of a company or people who've been there 20 years. That's not nearly as valuable as interviewing somebody who's been there 2 years and telling their story. So what was it like? What were you concerned about before you came to work for XYZ Construction? And I actually saw a great piece of content somebody put on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago during Women in Construction. And they interviewed several women who worked in the trades, equipment operators, grade checkers, and they just asked them, what's it like? And you didn't even hear the interviewer asking questions, but it was these ladies out in the field answering questions about what they love. What do they love about construction? How do they feel? And you could tell it was well put together because they were dealing with the questions that potential employees would have and the objections. Like one of the objections is, well, how are the guys going to treat me? And they said, I'm just like one of the guys. These guys actually take care of me. It's like having a bunch of big brothers. And I mean, it was so well done. But I think you're exactly right. So just to recap, go tell stories about the work you do. Go tell the stories of why your work matters, how it affects the community. Tell the stories about your people who have been there, short time, long time, whatever. Show the day in the life stuff. I could just imagine like a point of view video from inside the cab of an excavator. This is what it looks like. This is what it's like. This is how it feels. These are some of the problems that we have. The cool shit that you get to do in construction. I can remember. I think those of us who've been in it a long time kind of lose it. But I can remember the very first job I was on was a new library that was being built. And I'd been there for a few months, and I walked my dad around the job site, and there were drilled piers that were 36 and 42 inch diameter, 20 feet deep, and 16 foot high concrete foundation walls. And it was just a big, heavy job. And he was just blown away because he'd never seen anything like that. And I can remember the first 6 months of my job just thinking, this is the coolest shit ever. And I get to do this stuff. This is cool. And I think we lose that after a while. So I think we need to get back to, this is the cool shit we get to do. And it's pretty amazing, some of the stuff that we get to do. So tell stories, get the content out there, be consistent, put it where your target audience is watching. So great advice there. Now let's talk about one of the big problems that we have in construction, which is retention. It is tragic how many people come into the trades and then leave. Like our separation rate is much higher than average. And I think there's a lot of things. I think retention gets overlooked. And frankly, I think retaining our people is a big key to solving our skilled labor shortage. But what are some of the problems that you've seen young people, some of the biggest problems you see young people deal with and get hit with when they actually go to work for a company? What are the things that frustrate them the most that we need to solve?
I can tell you, so like it's somebody just coming in. I think some of their frustration probably is that company or whoever their trainer is or their project manager, whatever, expects them to know everything that person has years and years of experience and knowledge of because they've been in the field that long. So you can't expect them to know everything. You have to have somebody who is in charge of those recruits coming in to have patience. There's got to be some other type of class or whatever that you can offer them to, they get their field stuff, but then they get to come in and they get to learn stuff. I know that they probably just came from an apprenticeship or part of an apprenticeship or whatever, but there's got to be a place where they can go within that business to learn your systems, your culture, your stuff like that. Because if you're not doing that, somebody else is teaching them that, and it could be bad methods. And then once again, those bad methods or the false culture of that company is getting spread by somebody that is your project manager or whatever. So it's trickling down. They're feeding those kids that negative information or that information that's not true. So then having somebody in charge of those overall employees being like, hey, this is our, like there's some great culture like events that some of these bigger companies have and stuff, which are super beneficial in my opinion. And then having somebody where they're getting, I don't know if it's once a week or once a month, where they're doing training with the HR team, doing and there has to be follow-ups. There has to be some sort of protocol in there to make sure that these people that are coming into your business, into your workforce, are being treated okay, and that they can talk to you and that they can tell you, like, if they're not okay, why are they not okay? You have to find out what's going on out in the field. And those people have to feel okay with telling you that they're not going to get fired for ratting somebody out. But you need to know if there's negative things happening in your business, because that could be part of your problem. You're talking about, the rate that people leave our workforce. Well, what if you kind of just spotlighted one company, and you have all these people that continue to leave your workforce, and you're like, what is going on? And then eventually you find out, once again, it's kind of almost like I mentioned before, where it's like maybe the project manager or the supervisor or whatever is actually the one that's the problem. They're a cancer, and they're the ones that are spreading all this bad information or beating people down to the point where they just don't want to come to work anymore. And that's not what our industry should be about. But I think there's plenty of that going on. So I think that's part of the retention problem. The other part is probably kind of what I talked about before too, is they don't see a future for them. So how do you help them see? How do you create? So like some people could call it the career tree or career pathway or whatever. How do you show them that pathway? Like literally show it to them, like where you have it on, whether it's a printout or whether it's hanging on the wall or whatever. Like, you're here now. You're making this much money per hour or whatever. But if you do these things, here's these things, you can get to this level. And then if you want to be beyond that, here's the things that you have to do to get this level. Maybe it's a certain amount of experience. Maybe it's a certain amount of hours. Maybe it's a certain designation. Maybe it's going back to school, whatever it is, but it shows them the pathway to get to be like, hey, eventually I'm chief marketing officer, or hey, I'm a field supervisor, head of all the project coordinators or whatever. They just need to see the pathway and understand the pathway, and that being this entry-level person is not the end for them. And it's okay not to be a plumber anymore. You're like, hey, I did plumbing, but I actually really do like the business side of things. How do I get more involved in the business? Making sure that they understand that, like, hey, you did this, you did the plumber, you're in the field, but I want to be in sales one day. How do I get to the sales team? So just showing them pathways and things like that, so they know that this is not the end. It's just the beginning. How do I get to the next step? How long does that take? Set next expectations. Like, coming from a generation that's probably known as like the generation that loves the instant gratification we have it now. That's not really possible in a job. So like, it could be 5 years, it could be 7 years, it could be 2 years, whatever it is, letting them know what that timeline is.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. They need to see the career path, the career paths that are available. Do you want to go from skilled trade to superintendent? Do you want to go from skilled trade to project manager? Do you want to own your own business? This is something that I think a lot of young people don't understand, is you can own a business. And I think as a country, we need more construction business owners. We need people doing this stuff. So that's a great advice. Paint the picture, give them clearly defined milestones. When you can do this, you'll make the next level. This is what winning looks like. This is what I found that people at all levels want to know, is what does winning look like? Am I winning? Give me some feedback. Tell me what the next level looks like. What do I got to do to get to the next level? And it seems like I can remember when I was young, it was like an epiphany to me. Oh, this company wants me to grow. It's not like they're holding me back. They want me to go to the next level, because when I go up to the next level, that means the company grows, the company makes more money. So I think that's, in some cases, it's completely clear in the business owner's mind, but it just hasn't been translated. It's not said enough to those people. And I don't think people can hear that too much, what winning looks like. Going back to the retention issue, one of my pet peeves are some videos that I see on social media, these hazing videos, basically, where they get the new guy and they have him do some sort of seismic test by beating the ground with a sledgehammer in a circle as fast as he can, or breaking a bag of cement over his head, sending them for board stretchers. I had a guy that walked up to me once, new guy walked up on the job site and said, "Hey, my boss told me to come over here and get 6 feet of fallopian tube." That's a big joke. It's funny, but it's not, I don't think it's really helping the culture. So I think we need to cut that stuff out. And I absolutely agree that in many cases, the project manager, the superintendent, the foreman is the problem. I did a podcast with the president of a local chapter of the Associated Builders and Contractors a couple of years ago. He talked about that there are these unwritten scripts. There's like cultural malware in a lot of companies. Your vision statement, your policies and procedures may say one thing, but there are these, it's like somebody has hacked into a website and written this malware that how things are actually done. And if you're not careful, if you don't go eliminate that malware, those scripts that are running the informal way things actually get done, then you're very likely to lose some good people, and that would be tragic. Okay, so we've talked about some of the things that aren't working. What are some of the out of the box approaches that you've seen for attracting, or that companies are using? What are some out of the box approaches you've seen companies use to attract folks to their company?
I think you're seeing some of those. I mean, TikTok was probably considered out of the box two years ago, but apparently it is not anymore. But some of those hands-on events that you're seeing, whether it's whether it's a coalition style hands-on event similar to ours, or whether it's a company that just does their own, where they're taking the construction industry is taking the initiative to go out and do these things where it's not just your standard run-of-the-mill type stuff. I think that's very good to see that. I think it's good to see them start advertising and do things in different places. I think you're starting to see maybe just the change in some of the overall, where they're taking control of the message for once, and changing some of that stuff out there. I think it's I don't think that we probably still have a long way to go as far as innovation goes, or progressive ideas or whatever, but you're starting to see more and more of those things start to take place. And I think that's the biggest thing is having those initiatives or those ideas out there and starting to really just see a whole different perception of what the trades are. I think we're still not there yet. I would say that we're probably, we're in it, but we're still just riding the wave up kind of thing. Like we're not to our peak of what we can be yet, but you're starting to see some really cool things out there. I know for the longest time for me, seeing everybody do what they do on Instagram was the coolest thing, because you'd never seen that before. You'd never had access to that before. Well, now we have access to Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, things like that. We see everybody doing these different things. And I think really that's kind of like the future of marketing to your next generation of workforce.
Yeah. It was November of 2019. I went to the Procore Groundbreak conference, and Mike Rowe sat in on a panel discussion talking about the skilled labor issue. And he said something that struck me. He said, we have a perception problem, as we've talked about quite a bit here. And he said, what needs to happen is we need to find people who started off in the skilled trades, built a career out of it, and then became business owners. Because he talked about how he has worked with dozens of millionaires in his time at Dirty Jobs who started businesses, worked in the trades, and became millionaires, very successful entrepreneurs. And that really struck me. So I've started trying to collect these stories, and I interviewed a few folks last year pre-COVID. So if you're listening and you started off in the skilled trades and you are a construction business owner, and you want to help solve the perception problem by sharing your story on this podcast, then let me know. Send me an email, todd@constructionleadingedge.com. We'll talk about that, and you can be part of it. So if folks want to get in touch with you, Brandon, or if they want to get involved with what you're doing or find out more about what you're up to, I know you're in a lot of different places, but where should they go to get started?
Sure. Yeah, LinkedIn is like my favorite platform. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I think it's Brandon M. Patterson. Or you can check our website, iowaskilledtrades.com, or the Crew Collaborative webpage. Either one of those kind of just shows you kind of what we're up to. And then from my main pages, you'll see all of my other social media stuff. I don't get too crazy on there. I post mostly about work. I don't post too much other stuff. But as it's probably the best place to get in touch.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on here. You've got an audience of a few thousand construction business owners and leaders who've been listening to this conversation for long enough to show they're interested in it. What would you like to say to these folks?
I'd just say, keep up the good work, like, don't be afraid to change. Keep changing things, work on your culture, work on your recruiting, the way that you do it, really start to numbers and analytics has become a big thing over these last, as technology continues to play more of a role. Start to look at your numbers and your demographics and things like that, and really see where you're putting your time and your efforts. And, you'll see a change once you start focusing on where your audience is and where your generation or your workforce is that you're trying to target, things like that. It pays back very fast once you start to figure some of those things out.
Good stuff. Man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. I appreciate the work you're doing, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help you in the future.
Awesome, Todd. Thank you.
If you're tired of the pain of delayed payment or non-payment situations, here's some good news. You can take control and get paid on time for your hard work with Approval. Approval is a payment management tool for milestone-based projects that allows you to get paid faster. Get started today. Visit withapproval.com to see more and click Request Demo to get in touch and see how it can help your business. That's withapproval.com. Well, there you go. Be sure to check out the show notes for the links that I mentioned. And I'm serious about sharing your story on the podcast. If you started off in the skilled trades and you are now a construction business owner, or you were a construction business owner, maybe you've retired or sold your business or moved on to something else, and you want to help solve the perception problem and talk about your story of going from the skilled trades to construction business owner, then send me an email. Todd@constructionleadingedge.com, and we'll talk about it. I'd love to share your story. Be sure to head over to buildermasterclass.com if you want resources. There are videos and resources on managing communication, managing change orders, helping you get paid for estimates, and a variety of other things. As always, I appreciate the ratings and the reviews. If you could take a moment, leave a rating and or a review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast player of your choice, it would mean a lot to me, and it also helps spread the word out there to the rest of the interwebs. As always, thank you so much for listening. My name is Todd DeWalt from constructionleadingedge.com. I'll see you next time. A happy customer isn't just revenue, it's a marketing opportunity. From Google to Yelp to Facebook, join the more than 30,000 small businesses already using GoSite to request, respond, and manage reviews, all from one easy-to-use dashboard. GoSite puts the power back in the hands of you, the construction business owner, with a mobile app that transforms how you run your business by making it easier for customers to find, book, pay, and review your services online. Get started for free at